There was a trend earlier where 8 out of 10 chartered accountants would go into practice.
I know. I belong to the era, I guess.
That's correct. Now the trend has reversed, where you have 8 out of 10 chartered accountants wanting to go into employment and industry, given the varied application that a chartered accountancy course sets you up for. So today you can work in private equity funds, you can work as research analysts, financial advisors, and sky is the limit. So many chartered accountants are engaged now in entrepreneurship and startup. So practice is just one of the avenues now, and the course has just grown in size and influence that it has today.
Folks, welcome to Paisa Vaisa. I'm your host Anupam Gupta, and on today's episode, for the very first time, right? I mean, this podcast has been there for 8 years, and you'd think that something as important or as relevant as this, which is chartered accountants, would have been covered in depth in the past, and I myself am one, but I finally have the chance to cover this. My guest, CA Anand Bathiya, President of the Bombay Chartered Accountants Society. Okay, we'll get into exactly what it does, why it's important, its outreach, advocacy, and of course, one of the most important topics for the younger audience out there, what is CA all about? Is the course really worth it or not? All of that on this show. Anand, welcome to Paisa Vaisa. Thank you so much for doing this for our audience.
Thank you, Anupam. It's a privilege to share a dialogue with a fellow chartered accountant, especially on a birthday. So very happy.
Thank you so much. Very kind of you. Tell us about BCAS, right? Formed all the way back in 1940. 1949 is the
49.
same year as the
Institute was
Please
formed.
tell us. Let's start from there.
So, Anupam, the Institute of Chartered Accountants of India, which is set up under an Act of Parliament, was set up on 1st of July 1949. And the same sort of cohort or forefathers felt that we should have something in the Western India as well. And at that point in time, Bombay was not just a state or a city, but it was a region stretching across Maharashtra, Gujarat, parts of Pakistan, and even Yemen. So we're talking about an era which was even prior to our constitution. And at that point in time in the Western region, the Bombay Chartered Accountants Society was formed, just 6 days after the Institute of Chartered Accountants of India was formed. The institute operates on various different terms of reference in terms of standard setting, disciplinary examinations, and BCAS had a very razor-sharp focus on professional development, knowledge, and thought leadership. And that is where 1949 was the year. We completed 75 years just the last year. And over the years, the society has been growing. We have now members which are across 350 towns and cities in India. And we call ourselves as India's largest and oldest voluntary body of chartered accountants. Coincidentally, Bombay is now not even a state and not even a city, but we continue to remain our legacy and are proud of that.
So folks, all professions, doctor, engineer, lawyer, CA, all of them typically have industry bodies or some kind of an association to keep everybody in the profession together, working on stuff like outreach, advocacy, continuing professional education. If anybody of you are CAs out there, you know that you have to do a few hours every year. I know that I do it just to, to qualify, to keep your knowledge afresh with all the changes that's happening every year. Anand, let's get into the core of the work that you guys do, because you do a lot of work. Okay, let's probably start at maybe the most important work, top 3, and then talk about each of them and how they help the community.
So I think at a 40,000 feet, what we do is professional development. Now, when we talk about professional development, essentially BCAS and its activities has been focused on making sure that the chartered accountant community is equipped enough to serve its clients and companies. So the jungle of laws that we have in India, the kind of tax things that keep on changing every day, you need to keep yourself updated. And if a chartered accountant community is not updated, you can't expect the businesses to remain competitive. And Indian businesses need that competitiveness in today's situation that we are. So our sole objective is to make sure that the efficacy which the chartered accountants deal with their clients is something that is top-notch. And that is where in a year, we would be having more than 100 learning events on different topics of taxation, corporate laws, international tax, audit. And that is where we want to make sure that the recent and the live update of knowledge is something that is available to our members. That's what we do in professional development. It happens to various formats. We do seminars, we do workshops, we do certificate courses. There are residential refresher courses where people camp for 4 days in an outside city and just declutter their SEMs and study on subjects. The second part of what we do is advocacy, which is where as a community, one needs to understand the complications that we deal with. And that is where advocacy comes into play through representations, good policies, initiatives, suggestions. And that is where advocacy is very strong. like the budget which was there. Before the budget, we had a pre-budget memorandum which we submitted to those who matter, and then a post-budget memorandum, and a lot of thought leadership during the budget is what we do. So any such event on finance, legal, accounting, tax is something that we would want to have a say in advocacy in. And the third part of what we do is in terms of softer aspects of philanthropy. BCAS, through BCAS Foundation, works in terms of areas of financial literacy, in terms of creating awareness and helping CA students become better professionals. A part of that is also networking amongst chartered accountants, and that is where people come to a community like BCAS, network, and grow their circle of influence as well. So that's what we do: professional development through learning, advocacy, and networking.
Core is, of course, what we call practice.
Yeah.
Okay, and then you've got industry. I'll get Anand to explain what each of these is about. And in industry and practice and the foundation of any chartered accountant are 4 very core subjects. At least I believe they are. Again, please help me here. Accounts, audit, tax, and law. All these 4, so you've got practice, industry, accounts, audit, tax, and law. So if you're a CA, if you're studying to be one, you're looking at almost 30-40 years. For those in practice, it could be even longer, of being up to date with all the changes that happen. Like what Anand said, something like the Companies Act was formed at one time. Today, there is a lot of it. But to do that, you need to be constantly updated, and associations like BCAS help in that. Okay, a lot of our audience are non-CAs. Just help us with, like I said, the 2 broad buckets that chartered accountants operate in. Just like a primer, on what CAs do, practice and industry.
In terms of the function of what a chartered accountant does, it will be bifurcated into A, as you rightly said, practice, which is where you would take a certificate of practice given by the Institute of Chartered Accountants of India, and that would mean that you can then attest financial statements. You can sign the certificate of an audit report of a company or even a bank, and you would then be a practicing chartered accountant. The second is you don't want to do a practice, but you want to take a role in a company into entrepreneurship, or maybe wanting to work with a CA firm sometimes, and then you'll remain not in practice, but what we call as in industry.
Yeah.
So there was a trend earlier where 8 out of 10 chartered accountants would go into practice.
I know. I belong to the era, I guess.
That's correct. Now the trend has reversed, where you have 8 out of 10 chartered accountants wanting to go into employment and industry, given the varied application that a chartered accountancy course sets you up for. So today you can work in private equity funds, you can work as research analysts, financial advisors, and sky is the limit. So many chartered accountants are engaged now in entrepreneurship and startup. So practice is just one of the avenues now, and the course has just grown in size and influence that it has today.
For any company especially, accounts, audit, tax, and law are 4 things that you cannot get away.
True.
If you are operating in India or anywhere in the world, then these are the 4 things that you would need to have a very firm grip on, and chartered accountants can help in that. How many CAs are there total now in India?
So we would be having about somewhere about 3.5 to 4 lakh chartered accountants in India, and about half of them in the western region, and half scattered across other regions broadly.
My number is still in 6 digits. Okay, my father's, of course, was much smaller, and of course the firm that I used to work for, I think those guys were either in 3 digits or in 4 digits. So folks, as you know, CAs, the what's it called, the membership number, the membership number that's there even on your degree, that's pretty much like a running number. Like,
that's a running number.
You are that number of chartered accountant.
You are that vintage if you have that number.
So just
people in 4 digit are senior, and you can make out.
Bit of nostalgia there. Sorry for that diversion. Tell me about students. How do you guys help them? You just mentioned about how you help them become, groom them, or just, what are those things?
So in BCS, we have a platform called BCS Next, which is a by student, for student, of student kind of a cohort. And we have a student membership as well. So a lot of students who are pursuing their CA course as internships or even before that can get attached with BCS. And there are events and learning initiatives focused on students that this cohort does. Like recently, there is bank audits, which are right now going on because March gets over. And April 15 days are everyone gets involved in audit. And the student community did a learning event for article trainees, how to audit your bank branches. And that was very well received. So those kind of events are something that the student community does. They do an annual show, just like a college fest of chartered accountants, which is called Tarang, where students come together, network, and essentially showcase their skills, which are non-technical as well. So there are students who get attached to a large firm, and then within the firm they would have abilities to network, be there and build their network.
Okay.
But a lot of students would be working with smaller firms, proprietors. They would want to have that platform or ecosystem of a BCS to come network and explore themselves. And that is where they meet like-minded students. They share their journeys, and that is what BCS Next is all about. At a very broad level, the CA course today would be perhaps having the highest number of students it ever has had pursuing a chartered accountancy course. So it does find a lot of attraction. It is perhaps, to my mind, the course which gives you the highest ROI in terms of the spend that you do to do a CA course, as compared to the social mobility that it will offer to you, as compared to some of the management degrees perhaps where you might have to take a repayment of education loan for 3 years after you qualify. Here you are talking of a negative cash flow situation where your fees will be more than compensated by the internship stipend that you earn from working.
It's the most cost-effective educational course that you can do.
That's correct. So in the Indian context, for someone to have a social mobility, I think the course can do wonders. Yeah. And there are no reservations. It's just merit-based. We have in multiple languages now. So essentially that course does very good for a student. And someone looking to hone his skills in finance, I think CA is still the go-to course, Anupam, for sure.
Anand, you've been doing a lot of collaborations, right? I mean, that's part of the job. The two that really stood out to me, NISM-SEBI and IIM-Mumbai. Folks imagine chartered accountants body here reaching out to bodies like NISM, which NISM stands for the National Institute of Securities and Markets. SEBI, of course, is SEBI. IIM-Mumbai is, of course, IIM, their outpost here in Bombay. Just tell us about the strategy that you have in collaborations, right? Because I think for a lot of people who are doing their CA or are CAs, they would like to know that whether they can venture outside of their comfort zone. Yeah. And it would be great for them to have a few things sorted for them.
So Anupam, I think the trend that we have been observing is that over the last 10 years or 15 years, I think the participation of chartered accountants in securities market is something that has been extrapolating. It can be in various capacities. It can be in conventional capacities like auditors to companies or CFOs, or it could be in some of the areas which are now opening up, like research or fund managers, or even essentially on the regulatory side within SEBI. And the objective was that if we have some kind of a bridge with the regulator, and within the regulator with someone who is kind of again focusing on building capabilities and professional development. And that is where NISM stood out. And the BCS NISM collaboration looks to make sure that the chartered accountants are more tuned to realities of securities market, and essentially also get more exposure to areas where chartered accountants can apply themselves. We did one joint initiative with them, what we call as the AIF Conclave, which was a focused 2-day event talking only about alternative investment funds. Wow. And chartered accountant works in various capacity, some capacities like trustees or fund formers, etc., etc. And at the end of the day, we had called fund managers who are chartered accountants to let us know how the AIF ecosystem can flourish in India. And BCAS, NISM had a joint interaction with them. We also invited SEBI representatives, and we had a paper in terms of what can be done to enable further the AIF ecosystem in India. So the whole objective of the NISM BCS collaboration is to build capabilities in the CA community, and again extend our advocacy initiatives in the securities market as well. And it's been a very fulfilling relationship which has happened. On the IIM Mumbai,
that's very interesting, right? Because you would assume that CA MBA are kind of, opposing or whatever. I like to think they're actually complementary.
Yeah.
If you're someone who has a CA and MBA, and I know there are a few who have, that kind of a degree can just...
It's lethal.
Yeah. Please go on.
So IIM Mumbai, I think, if you see, Bombay is the only city perhaps which has an IIT and a IIM, and perhaps a BCS as well. So when IIM came to Bombay, and we kind of being in Bombay, we thought that it's only right that we collaborate with the two institutions of eminence, and we identified research as an area. Because chartered accountants do help a lot in terms of giving representation and feedback, but perhaps a lot more can be done in blue sky research in terms of policy, think tank, tax laws, etc. And which is where we collaborated with IIM, and now we are working on a research paper which is essentially talking about group taxation.
Okay.
So today in India, you have, let's say, a parent company with 100 subsidiaries, and you are looking at 100 different tax returns and compliances for that group. Whereas internationally in leading economies, you have a concept of group taxation, where I can check the box and all those subsidiaries, I can have a single compliance done for that particular group.
Okay.
And that eases out compliance to a large extent.
Yeah.
Now we are doing a research with IIM-Mumbai, wherein BCAS is providing the technical tax inputs in terms of what can happen, what can be the nuances. And IIM-Mumbai, through their research, is essentially making sure that we are able to get global contemporary studies
Wow.
and also essentially understand what has worked, what has not worked for some of those geographies. So bringing best of both the worlds together in terms of having a research paper on group taxation, and with the strength of BCS and IIM together, it can have further discussion potential when it goes to the people who matter.
Yeah.
The second topic of research which we have selected is on carryback of losses. Again, a slightly technical topic, but a concept which we don't have in India. The objective is to have best practices globally, make sure that they are supported by research, and then kind of use them to leverage for the benefit of Indian industry and Indian companies. So that's the focus as far as IIM-Mumbai is concerned. We are also having an idea to have a bridge between CFO to CEO, which is what we want to do with IIM-Mumbai, where essentially chartered accountants, of course, are best placed to become a CFO.
Correct. Yeah.
But how can we grow that influence up to becoming a CEO? And which is where the elements and layers of management come into play. So that is where a focused course with IIM-Mumbai from CFO to CEO journey is what we are looking at. So that's the purpose of these collaborations. These are early days of both these collaborations, but I think as they grow, we see a lot of potential in both of these collaborations.
Yeah. It's, the thing that I really find interesting is what you said about securities. Right now, folks, I don't know whether you know, but a lot of people who've come on this show in the last 8 years have also been chartered accountants. Nilesh Bhai has been there, and so many of them. From the markets, you've got like legends like Ramdev ji, Motilal ji, of Motilal Oswal, who met when they were doing their CA. And I believe that they're both, I know that Ramdev ji is a chartered accountant. So what they used to say about CAs back in the day, very long time ago, that they're very great in auditing and accounting in the business, but valuations is something that they can't. I think the curriculum at that point of time, of course, was something that didn't that didn't cover that. But it is so interesting because you could not find a better person to analyze a company's accounts than a chartered accountant. Like you throw a few annual reports to a CA, he will tell you where all the holes are. Believe me, and he does this because that's what his education is. You think that the market has, is opening up to this because 20, 30 years ago, like you said, because a lot of CAs were going into practice, coming into the market, of course, was very rare. That entire market, so any thoughts?
I think so. So I think two trends are emerging, Anupam, if I can say. One is, as you rightly said, a lot of chartered accountants are now looking for alternative areas of deploying themselves rather than just practice. And that has meant a pool of talent available for securities market, capital markets also to take benefit of. And second is what is happening is that our homegrown fund appetite, homegrown domestic institutions are all exercising their influence much more than what they have been doing. So hitherto, when we had, let's say, foreign companies or foreign funds wanting to invest into India, they would have some kind of a history or a relationship with people who would have worked in management colleges overseas. But once we have domestic fund and domestic institutions which are exercising influence, they have tried and tested and seen the CA course in action. Internationally, you won't have the CPAs or ACCAs focusing on that kind of a role in financial markets.
MBAs would do that.
MBAs would do that. But in India, CAs have been applying themselves, in most of these areas, and now it is only increasing. You can be rest assured that as far as the rigors and the fundamental and the kind of depth of understanding is concerned, CAs have always been top notch. But now with the course getting slightly tweaked, having the management layers built in, you are looking at packaging also being equally efficient and not just the product. So I think there's a lot of strength in terms of CAs applying themselves. You cited a few instances, but we can go on with the list.
There's a long list
in terms of CAs in securities market.
So folks, we're going to take a small break out here. On the other side, we're going to talk about the real stuff. What the course is about, how it's relevant today, threats, right? AI is there. All of that on the other side of this episode of Paisa Vaisa. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.
Did you know Indians report nearly 800 cases of online financial fraud every day, which has resulted in losses exceeding 1,000 crores in the last 5 years? To keep you safe from such fraud, I am starting my newest podcast series, Conversation with Vigilante, an initiative by HDFC Bank. In every episode, I will feature special guests who can share expert insights on the different types of fraud, their modus operandi, and how you can protect your money. Stay safe, stay vigilant, and don't forget to tune into Conversation with Vigilante. Catch the episodes on all audio streaming platforms and V for Vigilante YouTube channel.
Welcome back. Anand, AI, right? It's kind of disrupting everything. There is that thought that end of the day, what is law? Law is a bunch of statutes. Tax is also the same thing. Audit, accounts, all of this AI can do very peacefully. Any thoughts on, how the role of a chartered accountant is going to evolve in the future? Like, you have stuff where you can just take like as many PDFs as you want, upload it to some AI thing, and they'll give you the output that you need. So where are we now in this, and where do you think this is going?
Yeah. So I think AI, is something that all of us have been talking about, and it's there in every conversation. So AI per se, as a profession, we are not seeing it as a threat. We see it more as an enabler. If you talk about the chartered accountants, you'll always see them stretch for time in terms of filing deadlines, in terms of compliance deadlines, companies wanting their audit to be done on the 7th, 8th and 9th of April, just after the accounts have closed. And with that kind of expectation, both from the community and from the regulators, you would want to have tools that can do it faster, better and more effectively. And that is where AI comes to rescue. So while yes, a lot of the mundane work, etc., can be taken over by AI, I would think that a chartered accountant with AI will be much more efficient than a chartered accountant without AI. So yes, reskilling is something that will be required, but the people who are able to reskill, we are looking them as much better place to do their job as compared to people who have not reskilled. We don't see it as a threat. We see it more as an enabler, and which is where at the institute level, at the BCAS level, there's a mammoth exercise of skilling chartered accountants in AI, which is underway through various courses.
Very interesting.
And if that is something that is a way to go, then AI is only going to enable. Like I'll cite an example in my office. If I give one of my juniors to draft appeal to be filed with the tax department, a junior would take about 2 days to come back to me and tell me here is the format of an appeal, and I would still, being a chartered accountant, find faults in his commas and full stops and language and all. Here I get a first pass of a draft through AI in maybe 10 seconds, and it works for me on Saturdays, Sundays, holidays, all across.
24/7,
It's there. So the first part draft is something that can happen very easily through AI. And if I give that AI tool to my junior, he can churn out 10 appeals in a day rather than 1 in 2 days.
And probably spend his time doing something that's more
more productive. So essentially, which is where, enabling our people with AI is the way that we have been seeing as a profession, and we are not seeing it as a threat. At the same time, some of these trends are something that one should not, misjudge them. And I think at a fraternity level, the thought leaders are aware in terms of where we are going.
Yeah. I want to talk about some very, hairy and sticky areas that have been around for a while. Okay. Let me put it in this way, that when you meet the members of BCAS, you said that it's the largest also. In your mind or in your experience, what are the top 3 areas of concern that they have? Okay. I know that when I was doing my CA and then when I got my degree, there's a whole bunch of them. But in general, what are they now? And, is BCAS doing anything about resolving that?
So coincidentally, Anupam, when our academic year started, which starts in July, the first thing that we did was a membership survey. And we sent a flyer to all our members across India. And one of the pointed questions in that was that what are the top 3 challenges that you see for our profession? So we wanted to crowdsource that and then kind of have BCAS initiatives tailored to address that kind of a challenge that our members see.
Okay.
And the insights from that were very useful. The first challenge that our profession or our professionals felt was the impact of technology, what we kind of spoke as well.
Yeah.
And that's where AI and all of these things, we spoke about it. But essentially, there is a cognizance that something new has come up, and people understand that at the end of this curve, there can be a K-shaped kind of an outcome, where people who adopt technology will have a better situation and better place. People who don't can essentially, be on the lesser side of the curve. So that realization is there, and that impact is something that people are conscious to work towards, and that was the first challenge. The second challenge that we saw is what was attracting and retaining talent.
Mm.
Because essentially what we spoke about, the CA course prepares you for doing multiple things. And most of our community members are also practitioners, chartered accountants. And which is where their feedback was that sometimes to attract talent, sometimes to retain talent gets a bit challenge. A ranker chartered accountant would want to work in a hedge fund where he maybe gets his salary, which is in multiple terms, rather than working in a conventional role. Because conventional role is more like a marathon, whereas it's a sprint and a T20 that you can do in a hedge, and different people like different formats. So which is where attracting and retaining talent was the second challenge. And the third challenge which our community said is the changing regulatory landscape.
Yes.
So-
That was going to be my next question, but let's go for it. Yeah.
So over the last 4, 5, 6 years, because of some anomalies, some black ships in every profession that we see, we have a regulatory body called NFRA, National Financial Reporting Authority. And generally also we see that the regulators sometimes come down heavily on professionals under the assumption that they have been facilitating or aiding and abetting that, which is not entirely true. And which is where as a professional, you become a soft target. And that is where our community feels that, there should be a mechanism wherein we are able to communicate our side of the story as well. Even if the regulator comes and audits a balance sheet in 6 days, and I go and review that audit which the regulator has done, anyone can kind of look at it differently. So one needs to apply the rigors or apply the yardstick in the time frame and the expectation that one is, and not after 3 years in silo as to what could have been done better.
Yeah.
So that real life stimulation that a regulator should do, and all those aspects are the new reality that we are living with. Having said that, it's not entirely untrue that there have been instances which should not have happened, and NFRA has come in for a reason. But essentially the thought process is that is a challenge when the profession is dealing with, and we need to live with the new reality of where we are.
Yeah. So, folks, just to give you some background on that, I was going to approach this from the reputation and the credibility angle, right? If you look at the last 10, 20 years, you've had a lot of corporate scandals, accounting scandals, if you may. And it's happened abroad also. Take Enron, take Parmalat in France. These were back in the early 2000s. If I recall, in India, you had Satyam. So a lot of the thing about the auditor is that since he is the signing authority on the accounts that come out, the assumption is that he's the guy who says that, okay, these are fair and true and fair, okay? And obviously, if those are not true and fair, and if those are incorrect, it's the CA's credibility, reputation online. And it is a fact that in the last 10, 15 years, a lot of these scandals have happened. There's no hiding away from that, okay? And has there been a CA involved? Well, of course, there will be a CA involved because the auditor is a CA. You can't not be a CA to do that job. The government in their, whatever they were thinking at that point of time, made this body called the National Financial Reporting Authority. Okay, if there are 10,000 companies which do 10,000 annual reports a year, a few will go under, there will be a problem in that. Was there anything systemic or any introspection that's been happening on this?
So I think Anupam, systemically world over, there was a concept of SROs, or self-regulatory organizations, which has worked very well as far as professions are concerned, because professions have its own nuances, which are best understood by professions, and they are trained to be independent, they are trained to be governance savvy, and they're trained to be aligned in terms of the national interest. And which is where Institute was set up under an Act of Parliament as a self-regulatory organization. In fact, the disciplinary mechanism in the Institute also has nominees of government. And that is where it operates completely independent as a disciplinary mechanism.
You're saying the disciplinary committee at the institute, which is as high as you can get.
Yes.
So, folks, if a CA has done something wrong and you report that to the authority, it will land up at the disciplinary committee, which has, like Anand said, representatives of the government also.
Of nominee as well.
Nominees, yeah.
Now you get a situation like a Satyam, what happens, which is a stray case. And that is where you have a lot of knee-jerk reaction. And unfortunately, in our country, a lot of policy making happens based on knee-jerk reaction than maybe a thought-through proposition. And sometimes the answer lies in announcing something new. And that is what happened with NFRA, that it was announced to be a solution or a panacea for that kind of corporate audit that we have seen. There's a school of thought which says that whether we could do the same thing by strengthening the disciplinary mechanism at institute, maybe having more guardrails to make sure that its efficacy is more. And there's a school of thought which essentially meant that we need a little bit of a surgery or a revamp, and that is where NFRA came in. The Companies Act during that time was under revamp. The 1956 Act was getting revamped into a 1956 Act. And as a part of one of the updations to the Act, the concept of NFRA came in. And NFRA is settling in. The feats are still being found. There have been some adverse judgments recently. But yes, now we are at a situation where you have NFRA, which is codified under law, and it does the disciplinary part. Again, for very, very large companies, listed companies, a large part of other chartered accountants, smaller companies, all of that is something that the institute continues to have disciplinary oversight on. So NFRA is there, and we'll see how it evolves over the course of action, Anupam.
For our young audience out there, tell us about the CA course. Like I was telling you before we started recording, my wife's nephew became a CA recently. I had no idea. When I asked him, course mein kya hai aajkal? Please help that. It'll help me also know. What's it like now?
So from the time you qualified or from the time I qualified, I think the course has evolved significantly. There is a method that the institute goes through every 5 years in terms of a conscious revamp of the course.
Okay.
So now you have a course which has the foundation linked examination. You have the intermediate, and then you do a 2-year internship.
Okay, just hold. I want to just take a few steps back and explain this probably at the starting point. Right now, who is this course ideal for? I would assume BComs or pretty much anybody who's interested in it.
Whoever has passed the 12th standard is something that
Let's start from there.
That's correct.
Okay, so you've passed your 12th.
Yes.
What next?
So if you've passed your 12th, along with you pursuing your college, you can enroll for Chartered Accountancy course.
Okay.
You have the level 1 examination, which is what we call the foundation examination, which sets you up for a basic awareness about what the course is, fundamentals of accounting, finance, economics, tax.
So there's a curriculum for that.
There's a curriculum for that.
Yeah.
You study that, you give an examination, and that's where you get into the second level.
Okay.
Which is the intermediate level.
How long does the foundation course go?
Foundation would go about 9 months to 12 months.
So first year of college?
First year of college, you will be done with your foundation.
Next.
In your second year of college, you then go and you apply for intermediate, which is the second level. Yeah. You study for that, you pass that. And that is where, along with your second year or third year of college, you can then work with a CA firm or with a company or a corporate for a 2-year articleship or internship as it is known.
Yeah.
And after you complete your 2 years of internship, that's when you attempt the final examination, which is the third examination. So you have foundation, intermediate, and final. And between intermediate and final, you do a dedicated 2-year kind of a uninterrupted internship in an accounting firm or in corporate.
So that means with 3 years of college or 4 years, depending on how, wherever you're doing your college from, you then, so after college finishes, only can you do the internship, or is there some overlap out there?
So most of the colleges in commerce and even the CA course are aligned in a way that once the college gets over at about 11:30 a.m. generally in morning, students would get into internships, and they do about 35 hours in a week. Is the mandate which is there. So they shuffle their times in a week so that their college and internship go hand in hand. A very important part of the CA course and very unique proposition is the practical and theory combination. It's not just rote learning, it's not just theory, but you actually simulate and be in the firm and understand the culture and do client servicing as you learn. So that blend of theory and practice is what makes the course unique and 360 degree.
35 hours a week.
35 hours a week.
Certain people will not be happy with that. 70. So anyway, let me not go there. And that's it. After the once you've cleared the foundation, you're a CA, or is there any other?
Once you clear the final, then
final.
Yeah. You do have occasions where you do courses on management, which are bullets of 15-day, 20-day. You have courses where you do some elective papers, where essentially you have choice of papers and you pick them up depending on your specialization. So those are the nuances there. But by and large, it is foundation, inter, and final. After doing that, you are amongst the 0.001% of
India. What's the passing percentage these days?
Passing percentage, if you look at the number of students as to number of pass out, it will be in fractions. Like you would have about 15 lakh students, but about 20,000 chartered accountants come up every year. But But from the people who are attempting the final examination and passing kind of both groups together, you would look at about 10 to 15% kind of a number. So overall, it looks very stark. But you are talking about 4 lakh odd chartered accountants on a population of 140 billion.
The country the country needs more CAs.
The country needs more chartered accountants. For
sure. I know that CAs are mainstream because on Amazon, on one of the OTT channels, you've got a series called Half CA.
Yes.
But I didn't even know there's something called Half CA. But Half CA is apparently the term if you cannot progress from your inter. Yes. Inter CA के लिए तो Half CA बोलते हैं आजकल. चलो ठीक है. Who is it ideal for? Like if we have very, very young kids out here, either in the 11th or their 12th, watching this, who is the CA course ideal for, and what can a person giving his 12th grade exam look forward to once he jumps into this course?
So I think if you want to build your career in finance, if you want to build your career in tax, accounting, I mean, there's no other better course than CA. I may be biased, but yes, that's what I understand. And which is where sometimes even if you want to get into entrepreneurship, like for example, Mr. Kumar Mangalam Birla,
he's
a chartered accountant.
Yeah, he's a CA.
And what I understand is that his father made sure that he does an articleship and becomes a chartered accountant, because that will give him that understanding of business and he can apply himself better as an entrepreneur with that CA degree. So A is to get a qualification if you want to grow on finance, legal, accounting, tax fields. And B is even if you want to get involved in commerce and business, Chartered Accountancy is the course that will give you that well-rounded approach in 4 years that it does.
Yeah. And the other question that I get asked a lot, how does one join a Big Four? What do the Big Four, and having worked for one yourself, what do these guys look out for? Like I have become a CA, maybe from a smaller firm, which is the reality for a lot of people. What is the route to have a career in these Big Four?
Yeah, so these firms are multinational accounting firms, which have a pedigree of more than 150, 160 years internationally, and they operate in India as well through their affiliates. And yes, people who would like to apply to that, there'll be a threshold, there'll be a interview. I think given the global mobility, if one is looking for a global mobility, or if one is looking for a very focused initiative into a sector, then yes, Big Fours are people whom you prefer. If you're looking for breadth, if you're looking for applying yourself across the spectrum, then one would look at boutique firms. So in our profession, we have big firms and we have boutique firms. And depending on where liking is, one would go for a big or a boutique firm. It has advantages and disadvantages. Like all things in life, you get to work on larger clients, but there can be considerations of work-life balance that kind of come into play. Essentially, in the large firm as well, what matters is who is your small group that you are working at. So, you can have varied experiences of people who have worked in larger firms, be it the same firm, because the partner and the team that they were working with was different. And unfortunately, that is not something that you can choose when you are entering. So you'll have different experiences of different people working in Big Four. But yes, these are global organizations, been there since time, and a lot of learning go in working with them.
I just had one follow-up. I just thought of them. This is the last question, actually. Tell me something about the softer edge. See, क्या होता है ना, हम CA का जो degree होता है, उसमें once you get into that, the kind of rigor, and if you're doing your articleship, you'll land up at some outstation, you're doing an audit at a factory.
True.
I mean, and the sheer curriculum. Okay, let's not, वो तो छोड़ दो अभी यार, वो curriculum, there's a reason why the passing percentage is what it is, okay? All of that consumes an entire, the life and soul of a human being. Till, of course, he becomes a CA. Yeah. Anybody who's done that would know. You would know. I know it when I remember the time when I was doing for this. This comes at a bit of a cost, right? Which probably the MBA guys have a slight edge over us, which is the softer edge, your personality, how you're able to present yourself. How does, is that important at all? I believe it is, because when you present yourself in an interview in front of a Big Four, it's okay that if you know, every tax, audit, law here and there. But do you think that our, younger audience out here that's doing the course or is considering that course should also keep that in mind somewhere, maybe?
No, certainly important, Anupam. I think in today's day and age, as we said, sometimes packaging is as much important as the product. And I think realizing that factor, the new course which I explained about, the 2 year of internships that you do is uninterrupted. So you don't have any examination in that 2 year course, 2 year internship. Earlier, it was a situation of a 3.5 year internship, but you keep on giving your examinations as you go.
I did that.
Yeah.
I did that.
Yeah.
Band पर जाता था यार.
Correct.
जोर से, हाँ.
So then you are at a situation where you have college, you have internships, and you have your examinations as well. And the best place to understand and build on some of these softer aspects are essentially when you are doing your internships. And that is where an uninterrupted, focused internship is something that can hone that management skills or that soft skills as you spoke about. And second, the course has now been sprinkled with a lot of interventions that are on the management side.
Okay.
So you do a 15-day stint with management. There are now dedicated centers of excellence where you would go and brush up yourself on management.
Nice.
The BCAS is now conducting what we call as CAMBA or CA MBA, where we have tied up with Atlas Skill Tech University and where we are doing CA MBA kind of a course.
How nice.
Just to shape the softer side of things. So I think that recognition is there, and like any course, I think you are now seeing results of those interventions that have happened, and the new bunch of people that we are seeing are smart and essentially much better than what you and me would have been in our olden times.
I hope that's the case. Okay, Anand, we have a standard question for all our guests who come out here. Any book that you're reading or any content recommendations for our audience?
So given the current situation, and we're talking on a finance show as well, but the one that I'm reading right now is Value Investing and Behavioral Finance by Parag Parikh.
Oh, the legend himself.
Yes. So when you read the Buffetts and the Benjamins of the world, I think sometimes the Indian context to their thought making is different, and which is where this book is appealing to me in reasons more than one. And that's currently is what I'm pursuing.
It's so refreshing to hear that. We get so many recommendations from so many guests, but in my memory, I think this is the first time that we've got a book by the legend himself, Parag Parikh. So thanks for that. Folks, with that is a wrap on this episode of Paisa Vaisa. My guest, CA Anand Bathiya, President of Bombay Chartered Accountants Society. Check out their website, folks. Just Google them and you see the work that they do. They've got a very interesting journal. I believe that's accessible to anyone, CA, non-CA.
Anyone can subscribe to it.
As long as they subscribe to it. So do check that out. Check the website. Check the work that they do. But that's it. Anand, thank you so much for doing this.
Thank you, Anupam. It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thank you.